Hi, my name is Caroline Cunningham. I'm the interim president of the Olmsted Network, and we are delighted to have you here today. We have about 250 people signed up for the webinar, and we're thrilled that you're joining us. As you know, the Olmsted Network for the last 40 years has worked to protect landscapes of not only Frederick Law Olmsted, but of the Olmsted firm through advocacy, education, and stewardship. As you will hear today, and as you are living through this new time and have for the last 40 years, are really defending these beautiful parks that Frederick Law Olmsted believed were for all people. You'll hear today from different parts of our country, from Chicago, from Wisconsin, from Massachusetts, what's happening on the ground to protect these beautiful spaces and the uptick of taking of public land and for private interests. In these public sites, they're becoming less accessible to the general public and really more for the privileged. And as you will hear from Derrick Evans, who's literally coming from a courtroom in defending his public park, you can see the real impact of what's going on. I'm thrilled that we have these three amazing speakers, and I just want to introduce our moderator and our speakers. Bonnie Jean Feldkamp is a nationally recognized syndicated columnist in the Olmsted-rich city of Louisville, Kentucky. She has been writing and publishing for about 20 years, and she's the former community engagement and opinion editor for the Pulitzer Prize-winning Louisville Courier Journal. She's a former media director for the National Society of Newspaper Columnists. And our speakers, panelists today are Brenda Nelms. She joins us from Chicago, Illinois. She's a 50-year neighbor of Olmsted's Jackson Park. She is the co-president of the Jackson Park Watch, which is a community group formed and founded to protect the park from development and private entities and the development by private entities. We have Wyman Winston, who is on the Olmsted Network Board of Directors. He was born and raised on the south side of Chicago and now lives near Milwaukee, Wisconsin. He is the chairman of the 30th Street Industrial Corridor and the former executive director of the Wisconsin Housing and Economic Development Authority. He also served as the former deputy director of the Portland Development Commission and also the Atlanta Development Authority Tax Increment Division as well. And finally, we have Derrick Christopher Evans, a civil rights and environmental justice leader in Boston's Roxbury, and he is a native of Mississippi. He's a longtime educator. He taught middle school and also college courses at Roxbury Community College and at Harvard University. And he was awarded the National Bob Moses Award for Community Education and Organizing. And as you can see, he literally is in a car. He will join us when he gets situated, but from a courthouse in Boston. So Derrick, we appreciate your timely arrival. And with that, I'm going to turn that over to you, Bonnie.
Thank you. Welcome, everyone. I really appreciate everyone joining us. I think the introductions were wonderful, but I think it'll be a great idea if we start by quickly going around the room so each individual can state what city they're in, what park they're representing, and what project is the controversial issue of the day. For me in Louisville, Kentucky, we have been working with a local Olmsted Park, Stansbury Park, which had some controversy with the local University of Louisville. And they were holding public meetings to what to do with the park they didn't even own. And so that was something that we had to push back on because they had a whole grand plan without involving the community to turn things into intramural fields instead of upholding the Olmstedian view. So that's where I come from. And Brenda, would you give us a breakdown of what you're dealing with or what the controversy is there in your neck of the woods?
I live in Chicago. Chicago's blessed with 26 miles of lakefront park along, 26 miles along the lakefront of Lake Michigan, 22 miles of that are park, various sorts of various kinds. And that is prime development land looked in that way. And there are a rash of continuing rash, and will always continue, I think, of proposals to take over parkland for private interest. I live on the south side of Chicago, next to Jackson Park, as they said, which was designed by Olmsted back in 1870, 72, I think, really. And then redesigned again for the 1893 World's Fair, and again afterwards. It's in prime, it's a mile and 2 miles of lakefront, and 540 acres, and seen as not really used a lot or that sort of thing. And has, as most of you probably know, most recently been the recipient of the Obama Presidential Center, which is right now being built on that site. And we'll go into more detail about that. I and many others have resisted that and opposed that because of taking of parkland, public parkland. We got lots of other vacant land in Chicago. But there's a continuing rash. The Bears want to build a new stadium on the lakefront in parkland. There's going to be a quantum sci research center in parkland, that sort of thing, all along the lakefront. Jackson Park Watch formed actually pre-Obama Center to resist another program to put something in. We are seen by the city. We're an independent organization. We have no other affiliation than our own. We're mainly a information sharing center, try and dig out information to make things transparent so community organizations and community individuals can decide what to do. We are I think, considered by the city and the Park District, and in Chicago, those are two different agencies, as knee-jerk naysayers and pains in the butt. We see ourselves as enabling and empowering individuals to decide how to hold on their parks.
Wonderful. Thank you. Wyman, can you give us a short introduction as to what you're working with in Milwaukee?
I am part of the Olmsted Networks to oversee the restoration of Washington Park. Olmsted Park that was created after the 1893 World's Fair that Olmsted played a major role. Washington Park, some 450 acres. In the 60s, the state took its western edge to put in a highway. And now, with the change in driving in our state, they're going to replace this 4-lane highway with a boulevard. Which means that land that had been taken should be returned back to the park. Oh no, the plan is to take the remaining acreage and put in 40 to 50 units of housing. And so our efforts is to stop taking the parkland, and the dynamic that we have, unlike many of my colleagues, because they've already taken the land, their view is that we just don't have to return the land back to the public. And so our goal is to do that, is to return land back to the public, even at a point where a stone's throw from Washington Park is 2,600 vacant lots owned by the city, perfectly suited for housing, as well as to the north and east, the largest concentration of African-American children who have, at a national level, the least amount of access to public lands and parks. That's what we're fighting, is to grow parkland. And I have to end on my pedigree, Brenda, because I began my career in Chicago. Jackson Park influenced my career in the work I did when I was getting ready to do my architectural theses for graduation. I picked the South Shore Country Club that was just south of Jackson Park, influenced by Olmsted, and that was the building with marinas, golf courses, extraordinary event spaces that the Park District was going to turn into basketball courts. And so my career began in that same space, and I learned what I'm doing now and in many other projects from the work of folks like yourself in Jackson Park and South Shore that really were the citizens upholding our democracy in the context of public accommodations and parklands.
Thank you. Derrick, are you in a position to give us a 3-minute
Sure.
sketch? Okay.
Sure. Yeah. So my name is Derrick Evans, and I'm actually and primarily a Gulf Coast, Mississippi native and resident. But I own property here in Roxbury, where I am now. I'm going through entering the heart of the Black community, Roxbury, coming from downtown in the courthouse where a trial started today. But I came to Boston in 1984 to attend Boston College, which of course is located in Chestnut Hill, Massachusetts. And Chestnut Hill, like Roxbury and the so-called sort of the interior inland and upland areas of Boston today, but were once previous, towns or annexed places. Since the 1600s, they've been around. Was always replete with evidence of Olmsted everywhere. In Roxbury, which was, when I got here, a disinvested, low-income Black community. But just across the border in Brookline and Newton, there's some of the finest private Olmsted designs. So even Olmsted made a home here in Brookline. And so I felt quite blessed for years and years. In the early 90s to recent years, decades, to have redlined, segregated, unfettered access to Olmsted's legacy. And it was really here, and having previously worked my way through college doing tree work for an arborist friend who was born and raised in Chestnut Hill, that I learned to appreciate Olmsted as, in many ways, he was, 100 years later or so, a founding father of the nation, in a sense, because what he did, in my opinion, was he took the whole Jeffersonian concept of democracy to the next level. And essentially, no matter where you live, whether it's South Side Chicago or here in Roxbury, he made all people the landed gentry. And the benefits of human development and health and prosperity that comes from having old growth hardwoods and putting stone and all these other native occurring, indigenous features of your urban landscape, and to protect it, preserve it, and put it to its highest and best use, which is human development and health in an urban city that's intensively for who he saw way into the future. Well, this was the place, anywhere in America that I thought would be the least likely, that would be chopping up, carving up, privatizing, redeveloping, in this case with a private professional women's soccer team in the middle of a 500-acre crown jewel, of the Emerald Necklace network of parks here in Boston, which are really, in some ways, globally unrivaled. But sure enough, in one of my trips back here to Roxbury from Turkey Creek, Mississippi, where, by the way, I was inspired by Olmsted and the Emerald Necklace to promote a greenway as a way of preserving, protecting my ancestral African-American community on the Gulf Coast between Mobile and New Orleans that was being, zoned and redeveloped out of existence. And I went home there to spend 20 years fighting that. I come back here thinking this is sort of supposed to be a wellspring of these values and these stewardship, and nothing could be more than further from the truth.
Yeah. Thank you. I appreciate that. Brenda, I'm going to come back to you for the next question. And what we'd like to know is the Presidential Center, it broke ground in 2021 and is nearing its completion. So how has this project affected the public's access to it in Jackson Park? Can you give us a little bit more detail specifically on how this is affecting public access?
Sure. Well, the construction, which started in August 2021, is supposed to go through next year or maybe late next year, open up. And to say the least, that has definitely affected access to the park. It has kind of, you can imagine, not only are they building on a 20-acre site, there are also roadwork changes all around the park to accommodate this. And the combination has greatly diminished, and there used to be free parking spaces, and now there are no parking spaces. So the actual, unless you live close like I do, it's harder to get to, and certainly access has been cut down. The Obama Presidential Center site itself was kind of the center of family picnics and informal gatherings, that sort of thing. That's been greatly diminished. The road work affected some of the ball fields or soccer and softball, baseball fields. That's been diminished. So I don't have a count. I don't have a poll that says what the use says, but it's definitely been, and it's noisy and dirty and all those kinds of things too with the construction. When it opens, so there's been nothing we could do except mutter about that. We're very concerned about when it opens, what it means for public access, though. And I want to tell you, if you don't already know, the Obama Center is no longer part of Jackson Park. The Park District transferred 19.6 acres from the Park District to the city. The city leased it to the Obama Foundation for 99 years, $10, and the Obama Foundation has complete control of that property. So it's not part of the Park District, but it's smacked up against it. And we have been lately trying to determine, so how's this going to be managed? They've recognized that there will be some impact from the Obama Center over to the Park District. There's to be some kind of administrative oversight committee appointed by the foundation and the city, but it has not yet materialized, or at least not been made public if it has. The Obama Center says it will be operate like the other public museums, other museums that are in city parkland, the Museum of Science and Industry, the Art Institute, the History Museum, those things. But it also has the right to make special arrangements for its own security concerns and so on. So there's a lot of ambiguity in what's being promoted and planned, and we don't know. The Obama Center, the Obama Foundation, and the center plans to be a community center in addition to a museum, and to run programs and that sort of thing, but we don't really know. But those have been ill-defined too. It's across the street from the Jackson Park Fieldhouse and from a YMCA where there are already youth programming. So we don't know what's going on. It's going to do a lot of special events. It will replace the South Shore Cultural Center as the place to have your wedding reception very shortly. So, and we don't know, there's no clear indication of how is that going to affect both in just kind of access, vehicular or pedestrian access, as well as parts being cordoned off. It is subject at times, can be subject to the Department of Homeland Security should the Obamas visit. We don't know what that means, if there's still a department of any kind of federal government. But so there's a great deal of anxiety, which is increasing as we get closer and closer to perhaps opening, and still don't have any details. So we are very concerned like that. I also point out that, as I said, it's not part of the Park District anymore. 20 acres, 19.6 acres were removed of park space. The original, and gone forever. So maybe the original ordinance that authorized the giving of parkland to the Obama Center said the city would find 20 other acres nearby to replace. That never happened. The final ordinance mentioned that not at all. And in addition to losing those acres, they have then, and I think we'll talk about this in a minute as another aspect, gone to control in fact, if not in name, a part of the Midway Plaisance, which is a connecting park between Jackson Park and Washington Park.
That was exactly my next question, is I wanted to understand how it directly or indirectly affected the Midway Plaisance.
So the Midway, for those who don't know, the Jackson Park is a kind of north-south oriented park. The Midway is an east-west mile-long quarter mile wide park that links with Washington Park, which is another very large 400 and something acres park just to the west. And Olmsted designed them all together, and they were linked, and they have neat did have kind of neat connections in terms of passageways and so on. But they've been managed and cut off against all of Olmsted's cautions and requirements that parks should be considered as wholes and not sliced and diced. They've all been sliced and diced, and Jackson Park's a prime example of that. The eastern tip of the Midway Plaisance is demarcated because there's a railway line, a commercial and also freight, commuter and freight line that runs there. There's about 5 acres there at the tip. And when Obama first revealed their plans, they're in 2017 for their Obama Center, where we suddenly realized that, oh, they're going to close this road and they're going to do this, and they're taking over the women's garden and doing all kinds of things that hadn't been said before. It was a change of space. They also wanted to build a parking garage on the eastern tip of the Midway, an above ground parking garage. It's great. There was much pushback, and that they retreated on that, and are now have built an underground parking garage in a place that has the highest water table in the area. But the city had to was required, the city under something called the UPAR, the Urban Parks or Recreation Act of 1978 or something, the city had received money from the city to upgrade recreational programs in Jackson Park. And as a result, and a part of that agreement was that the land would forever be for recreation and so on. So they determined that the Obama Center, even though it's 20 something acres gone, actually we'd only lost 4.6 acres of recreational land, which is the footprints of the buildings, if you accumulate it. And that had to be replaced. And instead, we thought, okay, their western Woodlawn doesn't have parks. Let's put some there. No, they claimed that the eastern tip of the Midway would be replacement parkland, and the playing with words and definitions and everything just, drove people mad. Not only that, but it's a little wetland. There's a half acre wetland there, which the Park Advisory Council wanted to use as a educational tool about wetlands and the importance of wetlands. No, the city said, no, it's not really a wetland, although it had that designation from the Army Corps. We're going to drain it, and we're going to, because we need all that land in order to fulfill the 4.6 acres that we have to give back. And we're building a playground there for special needs people, children and adults with maybe sensory issues or physical challenges and so on. This is an area that I think Wyman will attest is heavily trafficked, surrounded on 3 sides by heavily trafficked roads, and on the 4th side by this heavily trafficked railway. Worst place in the world for a playground of any kind, but that kind. So anyway, it has been greatly opposed, but they're building it now. So there are other extensions of the Obama Center to the South Shore also, in terms of trying to capture that. I know I've used up my time, so I won't go into that, but the tentacles go every which way.
Absolutely.
And no attention to community input, I would say.
Yeah. Wyman, I'm going to come to you next. And if you want to quickly comment on what Brenda just said, you can go ahead and take like a minute to do that. And then I'll ask my next question, because I saw you put some comments in the chat.
Yeah, I'm very familiar with Brenda's talking about, and I have family that lives in Woodline. I was born in Woodline. That's what my connection with Jackson Park. But for the last 3 years, I have experienced what Brenda's been talking about in terms of the Obama Center. The main Stony Island, which is just west of the park, has been limited. Access to the Museum of Science and Industry, major attraction, particularly for young kids, is limited. Even now, there's been all these other discussions, adding the Tigerwood golf courses superimposed on Jackson Park, as well as the South Shore Cultural Center. And in the midst of all of this, when Brenda talks about the traffic, it's worse. When it talks about the lack of access to the parks because of this for young families, you simply can't cross. Even adults would be threatened by that. So it has not been a good neighbor in any way to the community. And I agree with Brenda. It requires that we continue to remember this is public lands and to resist turning it over to private enterprises.
Thank you, Wyman. Now let's talk about Milwaukee here. And it's often said that once parkland is gone, it is gone. So do you believe that you can be the exception? Can this happen? Can you bring back that from the highway to parkland once again?
The question is unanswered. That's the plan. You're right. Typically, when land is taken, it doesn't come back. But here we are, where partly because of our cars' impact on the environment and the fact that young drivers in Wisconsin, driver's license registrations are down, people aren't on the highways, so they're going to replace a highway with a boulevard. But underlying their strategy of putting this housing, there's something, and Brenda talked about it. I call it about holding up. Isn't this a pretty baby? Isn't this shiny thing something great? Well, in this case, the shiny thing at Washington Park is affordable housing, and there's dire need for it. But as I mentioned, there's a map that I'm adding to the chat. It makes no sense to take 40 acres of surplus land that should be returned to the park when there are 250 acres of vacant land that is right across the street from Washington Park. And so this is that dynamic, but I want to add something that ties to what Derrick talked about. This idea of the housing and their plan for the western edge of Washington Park is in part looking at how they deal with what used to be the segregated line between the predominantly white community to the west and the predominantly African community to the east. That is still psychologically the line, even though the communities to the west are now integrated. But there's this sense that we got to create a barrier here that reinforces what had been the barrier when the highway was put there. And many of the people on this call know that one of the major tools to reinforce 20th century segregation in urban areas was the use of highways to separate Americans by virtue of their race. And that underlies what they're trying to do in Washington Park. Will they succeed? I don't think so, but the verdict is still out.
Yeah, well, good. Well, here's hoping. Derrick, we are coming back to you. Are you settled in somewhere where you can join us? Maybe.
Yeah, I am. All right, sorry.
Wonderful. I know you just came from court and the lawsuit started today. And we've heard that it said that 40% of the park is already inaccessible to the general public because of this project, and the project would increase that percentage. Talk to us about exactly what ways the public will be affected by this if the plan gets successfully implemented.
You know, I'm going to sound crazy for saying this because it's so unfathomable, but it's almost bottomless, the impacts. I mean, on the one hand, the thing that drew me most and first would have been, you know, the fact that it's a African-American community, a historic African-American community for 4 or more generations. Olmsted's legacy, of course, and this community's chance to sort of, you know, to actually steward it in the application of the city for those decades, to steward it. You know, sweat equity, intergenerational collective public African-American sweat equity earned a rightful and continuing place adjacent to this park. It's the only place in Boston I know that reminds me of like my Southern roots and heritage as far as in nature in the backyard in Mississippi, you know, in a creek. And But I am still just aghast, and I'm trying to understand how the mayor of Boston, who is a nationally reputable rising star progressive climate justice resiliency racial equity spokesmodel, is really one of the probably the main force pushing this. Is like her pet thing is to bring professional women's soccer to Boston, and there's all these other options, but then she's selling it as an option for sharing space with the Boston Public Schools, which is what the stadium was built for in the Olmsted Park years ago. And it's going to displace those. And so the thing is, there's so many like sordid facts, details, lies, smoke screens that, number one, it wears people down to the point where they don't want to participate in a sham process. I mean, if you're going to lie to us, tell us a lie that's believable, you know, and so forth and so on. But I got to tell you, so many other people who should be on top of this and awake are asleep at the wheel as well. As recently as 2 weeks ago, the Attorney General, the African-American Attorney General of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, who has one of the state's only, I believe, 7 environmental justice laws statewide, right, to enforce or interpret or get launches on. It's not that old.
Yeah.
Publicly avowed in a local newspaper the other day that she has absolutely nothing to do with what she reduced to a political conflict between some, I call them like post-adolescent student government association leaders of the city of Boston, who have absolutely no idea what they or anyone else here or in Chicago, for as far as their counterparts are concerned, or Milwaukee, are charged with stewarding in terms of green space, in terms of justice, in terms of affordable housing.
Let me ask you this then. You just spent the morning in court. Okay, go ahead.
Well, let me just finish by saying,
Sure.
This case, if it is lost, will not only affect that park irreversibly, parkland gone forever, and that community, which is being pushed out of Boston as it has been gradually being for 400 years, it's going to profoundly influence the future in this entire Commonwealth of how trusts and wills are interpreted. So there is no limit to the depth of legal, physical, spatial, cultural displacement that this case, and that is why I am here right now as a plaintiff in this case, because where I really should be is in Turkey Creek, Mississippi, with my 90-year-old mother who just turned 90 the other day.
Wow.
Instead of fighting this in a place where Olmsted lived, and whose Black community fully understands and appreciates, don't need to be educated by anybody, who and what Olmsted contributed to their livability in this wickedly racist city. And it's just Armageddon.
Yes. Yeah. Thank you for that. I want to know, 148 trees are already down. They're already moving forward. What are the hopes of this lawsuit, and what do you think the outcome will benefit this city beyond? You mentioned it's going to impact how wills are interpreted and things like that, but what else can it accomplish at this point? Like I said, they've already felled 148 trees.
Well, Franklin Park is 500 acres. It's in an area of the park. It's on the sort of the northern. It's kind of oriented like a diamond, and it's near the top of that. I don't really know. I mean, I was in a conversation just recently before getting into the Uber about how, no matter what happens, once you litigate, which is unfortunately the thing that you have to. People have better things to do than to litigate. It's expensive, it's time consuming, and it's a last resort. So the thing is, it's in someone else's hands now, a judge. So my attitude about it is, if these people don't, whoever they may be, don't care or regard the multiple impacts that this case and this situation is going to have, even also, I should add, constitutional law in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, something called Article 97, about changing the use of public open space, which was, I think, amended to the Constitution in 1972 or something like that. It's called Article 97. All of these laws, from constitutional to legislated, to adjudicated, to whatever, are in the crosshairs along with Olmsted and these black people. And it's being reduced by folks who want to, shirk their. So there's no telling what the outcome of the case is going to be. But all I can say is this for sure, that when that case is won or lost, because it's really up to the judge who would open the trial today, it is either going to have to immediately turn into a local and national big story about a victory for the people, for Olmsted, for race, for climate change, for the primacy of law that are on books, or a funeral dirge about a martyrdom involving all of those things. It's that big.
Wow. Thank you. Thank you. That brings me to my next question, and this one is for all of you, is Olmsted championed parks for all people, but 1 in every 3 people don't even have a park within walking distance of their home. How can we, besides litigation and that last resort ditch effort, how can we in our own communities ensure that parks remain accessible to all people of all backgrounds? Is there something that the everyday community member can do to champion that before it gets to the courts? Brenda, let's start with you. What are your thoughts?
Well, we've all 3 of us have had more tales of woe than of success, and certainly that's true here in Chicago, where the Obama Center is rising even as we speak. But we did have there was one aspect of the opposition to the revisiting of Jackson Park, tearing it apart, and that had to do with something that Wyman mentioned, which was the Tiger Woods golf course, which was not technically part of the Obama Center, but was kind of enabled and encouraged by President Obama, bringing in Tiger Woods and all of this. And it was going to take over. There's already a golf course in Jackson Park. There's one at the South Shore Country Club. One's 18, one's 9 holes. Nice, lovely golf courses, friendly to locals, and a wonderful thing to do on a day. To merge them with very expensively digging underpasses about 2 feet from the lake, and merging them, lengthening all the fairways, destroying a nature sanctuary at South Shore Cultural Center, selling the great shot you were going to get, tee shot you were going to get looking at downtown Chicago from the Cultural Center spot, and raising the rates on, making it a PGA course, so it would attract all kinds of people from far away, including tournaments, and raising the cost for locals. So there was a lot of pushback on this for a zillion reasons. One was 2,000 trees were going to be cut down. One was the loss of the nature sanctuary. One was the raising of prices, and we managed to. There was a huge amount of pushback, and it wasn't supposed to cost anything, of course, because they never really do. It was going to be private donations, and it's not dead, because there's still in the books a contract between the Park District and an organization. I worry every night that somehow it's going to rise again to haunt us. But for the moment, it seems to have been abated. The golf course still needs work. They have dirt in their sand traps instead of sand, like the folks on the north side golf courses. But it's a question of really articulating, although Derrick articulated all the issues in there, and I can understand why they aren't having more traction, but of putting together and being persistent and showing up and mobilizing enough people at meetings, and editorials and letters to the editor and that sort of thing over and over and over again over about a 6 or 7 year period to make it just kind of die down. So that's my only hope.
Thank you. And we have about 10 more minutes before we get to questions from everyone. So I want to get through these next 3 questions. So Wyman, what are your thoughts of what the everyday community member can do to help people have access to parks no matter where they live?
We should remember that as Americans, we live in a democracy, and the organizational chart of a democracy is the people first, then the government and elected officials. So that's one. Second, you gotta be involved. You know, all of us could talk about, I think Derrick has talked about, he'd rather be fishing and taking care of his mama than dealing with this. And so that means that all of us citizens, we're all citizens doing this. And even though we don't have the money or the knowledge, we have the right of law, and that is part of our democracy. So advocate, educate, resist in the context of the powers that we have as citizens in a democracy.
Thank you, Wyman. Derrick, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, I would echo that 100%. I mean, it's about education, it's about learning, and it's about living your learning, your education, and those to be intertwined throughout, and understand that place is the place. I talk about placism. You know, this is placism. I mean, it's where you are that is the weapon. You know, that affects your quality of life. And I just think it's so ironic. You talk about education. Now here I am, an African American brother from the Gulf Coast. You know, you couldn't get no further south than from where Turkey Creek is. I have to come back and inform the city of Boston, me, that this year is its 250th anniversary of the British siege of Boston. It's under siege now. And if you're not paying attention to Franklin Park, well, guess what? It is your Selma for what you are paying attention to in this city. And the duplicitous shell games and code speak. And I mean, one thing the public can do is, I'm telling you, man, make these so-called northern urban progressive mayors and council people and so forth prove it. Stop giving them a free pass because they're not Mr. Trump or somebody else who you think you fear worse. Because living under two tyrannies is entirely untenable. One local and one federal. And as far as I'm concerned right now in Boston, it's the local one that's kicking your ass, right? Right? On a daily basis. I don't believe Trump or anybody going to Massachusetts too easily. All right. So get it right with Olmsted and with the schools and the rest of it. And then you'll find your connectivity, your synergy, your holistic, you know what I'm saying? Like, it ain't new. Olmsted and before him here in Franklin Park, the Massachusetts people for whom the state is named knew that ridge where that stadium is located in Franklin Park was sacred. It's the only place on earth that has the pudding stone, so-called Roxbury pudding stone that was formed by glaciers during the last ice age, which is what brought those indigenous Algonquian speakers to this part of the Atlantic coastal plain. All right. And it was the one high point from which they could see their mother, which was the Great Blue Hill, and the Atlantic Ocean, the estuaries, the islands, and the two rivers and river basins that comprise the entirety of the city of Boston, the so-called Charles River and the Neponset. It is sacred ground. You either obey it, you either obey your laws, you know, you obey your inherited cultural institutions. You learn how to steward them instead of thinking that it's your throne, you know, to destroy because you don't know better, or we're doomed. And I guess I'll end by saying the situation is the boss, right? The situation is the boss. Our job is to be excellent and do what the situation says do. So there.
Thank you. Yeah. I'm gonna stay with you for this next part too, because we also know that funding is an issue with parks, and we also know that a lot of places are looking to those public-private partnerships to just survive. So, what are the things that we can do as good stewards to ensure that these partnerships are beneficial for everyone, they are honorable, and do what needs to be done to protect the environment in the meantime? What do you think of that? What are your thoughts around that?
Who?
You. We'll stick with this one. Sorry.
Well,
Private partnerships.
I'll put it this way: the best partnerships are all partnerships. Okay, that answers half the question. Like, where were you before? That is the first interview question for a partnership. What have you been doing, you know, for us or whomever, wherever lately? I mean, you know, you're talking about like this proposed partnership between this professional women's soccer team and the city.
I think just in general, because with parks struggling with funding and partnering, and I know here in Louisville that we have the Olmsted Conservancy has a memorandum of understanding with the city, and they provide a lot of supplemental funding for these city parks. But at the end of the day, the city can lease something to U of L if they dang well feel like it. And so
Well,
how do we
yeah.
how do we uphold those partnerships in an honorable way that is good stewardship to our environment and our urban space?
Well, fortunately, here we go. Here I go back to the irony of situation.
Okay.
One of my fellow plaintiffs in this lawsuit against the city of Boston and the soccer team investors is the Emerald Necklace Conservancy, which is a 25-year-old 501c3 that was formed to give a citizen portal for partnering up with the city of Boston to steward, shepherd, maintain, the entire Emerald Necklace, including Franklin Park. And so it's got 25 years of carrying more than its own water to get that done for the city, identifying resources to get like you just said. And unfortunately, the only and the best thing that it can do about that partnership that on paper it's still in is to sue. What kind of sense does that make? You got a nonprofit organization of volunteers and private donors and park users that are willing and able and eager to help the city do its civic, its public, its environmental, its climate change or whatever duty. And it ends up having to sue you because you want to liquidate the best piece of the whole thing for something that it was never intended for by anyone or anything, not just Olmsted. Okay, it's just not intended for that. And that's really bad. I mean, that's I don't know how it's going to take me a while to figure out how do you navigate those kinds of dire straits.
Yeah. Wyman, do you have any thoughts? How do you approach a partnership to make sure it holds integrity?
I'm going to pick up with Derrick left off. Sue, and I'm going to just bring your attention to Alexander versus the Chicago Park District, which was sued the Park District for what you just described, Derrick. And remember, we live in a democracy where part of the suits is that there's monetary damages. The program that Brenda just talked about, that's that next wave of congressional dollars, those dollars came because there was in that Alexander to Park District suit, then with national, that showed the federal government with duplicitous, that if federal money that was supposed to go into Roxbury, Derrick, went next door. And they were able to trace the money come in and then might immediately go out. And they basically said there were damages and the millions and millions of dollars came in. So one of the ways we can get money in is to sue. Now, I'm going to bring that to Washington Park. Washington Park has been starved. It has not received taxpayer dollars since 2005. It is being starved to death. And you know a park is starved to death when you have a weed tree growing up in a park bench where it has ripped the bench out of its moorings. The state of Wisconsin is sitting on a $6 billion surplus. That's our money. The city of Milwaukee gives the state the vast majority of dollars, but those dollars don't come back. And I just think that there needs to be, sometimes you don't have no other choice in a democracy than to sue for your money. The citizens of the north side of Milwaukee that has these large number of young families with kids need to be suing their state for money that they're sitting on that should be used to repair and increase parks. And I think some of those same suits, as I said, benefited Jackson Park. The South Shore Cultural Center would not exist if it had not been for that suit that proved that the Park District was racially deploying money as well as disinvesting the African-American community. Exactly what Derrick just described is going on in Boston, is going on in Milwaukee, and it is where the color line is in terms of dismantling cities that are now urban areas that are predominantly brown and Black.
Yep. Yeah. Brenda, do you have thoughts to add to that?
Well, I myself am, when I hear public-private partnership, I immediately get the hairs on my neck go up. I know they're always tilted toward the private. There's they wouldn't be there if they couldn't make money. They couldn't do whatever. It didn't. And trying to expose that and articulate that very clearly and going in. I mean, you do that in a lawsuit if you actually list it all, whether you win or not. I don't know, but all of that. Again, Wyman mentioned these things are always presented as, let's see, something wonderful is going to happen. It will solve all of our problems, and it won't cost us anything because these other people are paying for that. If it's too good to be true, it's not true. And I just think over and over, people have to be educated about that. And I also think we and others need to do a better job of saying we need public money for our parks. Parks are essential, and they are. They should not be taken for granted. They should not be seen as just vacant land. It's the vacancy is the valuable part of it, and we need to do. I mean, I know the Olmsted Network and others are all of us are trying to do it, but penetrating that and getting that to be a consistent theme that is accepted by political leaders in every city and every state. We got a long way to go on that, and I other than keeping at it, I don't know what else.
Yeah, we're gonna do a rapid fire round for our final question, and I want to know that when you're grappling with the threat of development, even near the public parkland, what is your best tool in your tool belt defense tool against that? And let's hope it's not just litigation. Brenda, what is your best defense tool for encroachment on parklands?
Well, it depends. At the moment, one of our valuable tools,
rapid fire, Brenda,
is our alderman. If you're in the city, if you have if you've cultivated the alderman and properly and keep them informed about whatever's going on, then that's the best way to have an immediate impact. Doesn't always work. Didn't work with the Obama Center, but that's the first step, I think.
Okay, thank you. Wyman, what about you? What's your best tool, defense tool?
I think one of the best tools is knocking on neighbors' doors and educating them on what they sometimes feel but don't know. And that connection, when you educate someone, their light bulbs go off and they're now looking at their park differently. They're looking at the struggles they've been having where they take their kids, they got 4 years old. Now all of that comes into some clarity. And then add to what Brenda said, then you go, you take those to those local leaders, because again, what has worked, even though we've talked about his hard work, is that when we have success, it is almost always driven by citizens using their democracy and the power they have in the democracy in a way to advance good for all citizens. That is, when you see that, it is a beautiful thing. And it occurs because of some of the people on this call through the hard work they're doing. One-on-one is where it always begins, though. Go talk to your neighbors.
Derrick, what's your best defense tool other than your lawsuit?
Well, I'm gonna have to agree with that. It's cross-fertilize, meeting your neighbors, talking to your neighbors, being on the same page because you're in the same nest. I also want to add, though, after that and beyond that in litigation, and this is ironic because on the one hand, I do what I do, again, in the reddest and in the bluest state in the nation, Massachusetts and Mississippi. And I got to say that they have different answers for almost every question like this. In Mississippi, believe it or not, the way to get this done is to, like you say, talk to your local elected person, get them to understand, get them on board, find out what's in it for them, and you get partnerships made there. This is such a competitive and frankly adolescent environment as far as like the elected leadership and so forth and so on, that I say the absolute opposite is true. I mean, I would never do this in Mississippi because you wouldn't get away with it, and my mama wouldn't be happy. But in Boston, I say shame them, bully them, call them bad names, tell them they're a phony, a fake, progressive or whatever they call themselves in public, don't even matter what they call themselves in public, whatever they call themselves in public, tell them that they're a sorry one. Okay, they're a phony one, they're a fake one. And I think that that's, I can't say that it works or not because I haven't been here long enough doing it. But that's the shortest path I see for raising awareness here. Everybody likes a good food fight.
Yep. Thank you, guys. We have about 5 minutes left, and we want to end a little bit on an inspirational or positive note. But I do want to add, my 2 cents here from Louisville is Brenda had mentioned about op-eds and letters to the editor, and as a columnist, that's where my heart and soul is. Lift those community voices, write those letters to the editor, because even if your neighbor isn't reading it, those politicians are reading them. That's how the public shaming comes into play, because I know as an editor that they read the newspaper because I hear from them. So write those letters to the editor, they matter. And then I want to know, how do we engage, and what are some positive things that you have seen on as the community comes together to push back on these encroachments? Have you seen young people get involved? Is it social media that gives you more opportunity to disperse information? Give me your little ray of hope of what you're seeing among good people in the fight. So Brenda, I'll start with you. We lost Derrick somewhere.
Well, I agree that reaching out, I do think reaching the younger generation, whoever that starts or ends, is right. I do think social media is important. We, Jackson Park Watch, have not done that very much. We have other companion organizations that are wonderful at it and are doing a great job of getting young people out, both to do volunteer work, to knock other doors, to attend meetings and help staff meetings and so on. We benefit from having the University of Chicago in our area, so there's a steady pool of students willing to do things. But we've also gotten high school students out, and anyway, so I do think that's an important avenue. I don't have the expertise and the experience doing it, but I have seen the effects, definitely.
What are some of the things you've seen, Wyman, on the rallying front that gives you some hope?
Working on building a new bike and hiking trail that will be the first through Milwaukee's African American community. And to do it, I've been working with the 10 neighborhoods there that are a mix of both Black, white, low income to middle class. And it's just been a beautiful thing when we've all sat down and just seeing how this has come together, where as I said, it's just been a beautiful thing to see citizens come together. In front of us, will this trail connect with Washington Park, as it would be adjacent? All of that is what's in front of us, and the initial work to both propose it, announce it, advance it for the last 2 years has been that groundwork of all these leaders. And the other part, I've met new people.
That's awesome. Derrick, are you back? I think we lost you there for a second.
You did, but I'm found now. Hallelujah.
Okay. We are on our final question, and the question that I had is, I want to know what hope you see in the rallying efforts of the community. What's that ray of hope you see in the people coming together for Boston?
Well, I'm beginning to believe that, and this always helps me a lot, and I think it helps me do so much of what we've suggested doing with our neighbors, getting to know them, with education, with outreach, and just relationship building, and every now and then the the incendiary comment or what have you, is to know that where you are, when you are there, as far as the community and the park we're talking about, and who you are, is to know and believe that that's an anointment, an anointment. I think Olmsted was anointed to bring something to us, and he did, and it served very many purposes over many generations, and even changes in the communities that were living adjacent to these places. But now we're in a time and a place where I think we have to also give ourselves the additional empowerment as communities and individuals and organizations to realize that this challenge may very well be, and I think it is, because we in these places are anointed, we're chosen to carry them through something like David and Goliath, or these other stories in the Old Testament, and other sacred scriptures, that there's something not entirely accidental and tragic in the long run about this. And that's what I think gives me hope.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. I'm going to bounce it back over to Caroline, and so appreciate all of you.
Thank
Thank you so much. I really appreciate what I heard today. And just a couple of takeaways that I heard was looking at the potential challenges in your parks right now. Like, start preparing for them, start thinking about them, start developing some strategies. Two, I heard both from Derrick and Wyman and Brenda, actually everyone, that, you know, building relationships is key, both on your neighbors and the community, but also political leaders now, so that when problems arise, that you have the relationships intact are critically important. Three, building the capacity, and I think that's what the Olmsted Network is really focused on, is making sure that the community parks and the activists around the country who are protecting these amazing Olmsted spaces and parks for all people, that each of these community groups has the capacity and the strength to carry out and protect their parks. So I hope that you will stay engaged with the Olmsted Network. We will continue to have conversations like this and dive more deeply into capacity building for our park partners. And that if you want to continue to watch these, the Save Olmsted Spaces will be on YouTube, so you can go and use them as a resource for you. Just on a couple of notes, I want to invite people to join us at our pop-up in Atlanta, so that you can experience some of the additional Olmsted parks in the planned community of Druid Hills. That's April 4th through April 6th. And I encourage you to look on our calendar at olmsted.org and see other events that we are having this year and that are happening across the country. I want to thank Bonnie and Brenda, Wyman, and Derrick for this amazing conversation today, and thank all of you for joining us this afternoon. Thank you.